Hi everyone. Got a larger group here today. As you can see, I am not Caroline. If you were here last week, you'll know that she's in Cape Verde on holiday and some of us have to work. So I'm here. You have me. Let me just see if there are anyone else in the participants that want to come in. It looks like we're all in. Right, so we'll get started with today's call. Today's call is a Q&A. So who's got a question? I'm guessing you all do because you're here. Anyone? Yeah, go for it, Lorraine.
Hi, Nadia. I just a quick one, really. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
We've got someone on a phased return. She's been on long-term sick and she's been on a phased return for about 2 months now. I just wondered if there was a maximum period or if there's anything we should be doing.
Well, there isn't a maximum period for a phased return. Generally, they can last anything between a couple of weeks and sort of 6 months. But that's not a hard rule. That's just generally kind of what it does. A good way to handle it, though, is to do regular reviews with her. So maybe every couple of weeks or so, see how she is, see if she can make small increases to build up towards her, either her previous role and hours in terms of duties and hours, because those are usually the two things adjusted, or if she can build up towards where you guys are aiming. So maybe you're never aiming to get her back to full duties and full hours. Maybe you're aiming to get her back to 30 hours a week and doing her normal job, for example. So the idea is just to meet with that person regularly, not applying pressure, but reviewing where they are and slowly but surely seeing if it can be built up.
Okay. And if they, I'm not saying she does, but if she approached us and wanted to reduce her hours, would that be a flexible working request?
That depends.
Right. Okay.
The correct answer on paper is yes, it's a flexible working request. The blanket answer is if you're happy with it, just say yes, and confirm it in writing. So if she's saying, I know I used to work 40 hours, I'm on this phase return, I can see I'm never going to get back to 40 hours. Yeah. Can I reduce my hours to 30 hours? And you guys are thinking, yeah, that kind of works for us. Then just say, yes, absolutely, no problem. And you confirm it to her in an amendment letter. If you have niggles about it, or you might want to negotiate on how many hours or shifts, then ask her to do it in a flexible working application, because then you can go through a process that allows you to give an outcome.
Lovely. All right. Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? Dawn.
Hi. I've got some staff who are on a 40-hour contract, and sometimes they like to finish early because it suits them. But obviously, when it's a 40-hour contract, we're obliged to pay them 40 hours. They're obliged to give us 40 hours. And sometimes what people have done, if it's like a whole day, they've taken off, had an annual leave day. But what happens when they actually really don't mind not being paid their 40 hours and they actually want to leave earlier?
So this is something that we don't normally see with people on 40-hour contracts, especially in hospitality, in hotels, because they tend to work so many hours anyway that it doesn't matter. But it is something that we very regularly see with people on variable hours contracts. So I'm kind of going to just do both for you. So I'll start with people on variable hour contracts or part-time hours who are working, they're paid per hour, basically. So you might have someone who's contracted to work 16 hours a week, but they regularly work 20 or 30 or whatever, and they want to go home early from a scheduled shift. If they say, oh, we're not busy, boss, can I go home early? You'd be like, yeah, no problem. I'm just going to mark off here. You're going home 2 hours early, so you'll be paid. You won't be paid for the 2 hours. No problem. Off they pop, and that's sorted. So that's really easy for someone on variable hours. However, if you have someone on full-time hours, you need to be a lot clearer about this. You need to say, all right, but you can go home, but you understand that you are contracted to work 40 hours. So if that means you're only going to work 37 hours this week, then, those 3 hours will either need to be unpaid, or you can use holiday if you want to. And if they say, yeah, I'll just use it as holiday hours, whatever they say, just kind of make a record of that somehow, so that you have a record of why you've paid them less, because
this is like on a reception, hotel reception, and some of them are happy if it's quiet to go early. And that serves us because it's cheaper, and we don't, and they're happy to go earlier. And I'm just like, well, we're obliged to pay them 40 hours. They're obliged to work 40 hours. But so would it be just maybe good to just have something in writing and say, look, because it's especially a couple of people, to sort of say to them in writing, okay, we understand that at times you are actually happy to leave earlier, just to make sure that you
no, because that sounds like you are suggesting that they sometimes leave earlier and they're happy with it, and then you're paying the 40 hours,
right.
You're on the block for the 40 hours. If you are encouraging them, or even making the suggestion that it's not busy, one of you might want to go early,
Can we not just word it in a way that they've come to us?
So you might want to have something ready that your manager can use when an employee comes to the manager and says, it's not busy, I don't really want to stay till 3, I've been here since 7 this morning, it's 12 o'clock, can I leave now? The manager goes, yeah, we're not busy, we haven't got a lot of check-ins, sure. And then he just prints this out and he's like, just sign this that says that you have requested to leave 3 hours early, and therefore those will be unpaid or they'll be holiday. If that's what you want to do, if you want to have something like that. But
it's just, I'm wondering if I should have something in writing, because obviously if we then get audited and they can see that somebody's like on this and we're underpaying them, I just like, having something in writing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to maybe have something in writing, even if it is just the manager sending the employee an email to say, just to confirm, you asked to leave 3 hours early today. Yeah. You agreed that you are happy for those to be unpaid. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, and just stick it on their file.
And just email it to them and stick it on the file. Then if one day the auditors say, like some weeks you pay this employee 3 or 4 or 5 hours short, why? Then you can say, oh, here's the backup. The employee asked to go home, they're happy with unpaid, or they're happy to take it as holiday, whatever. So you don't have to have something pre-prepared, but the manager should just send them something. And this is really just for full-time employees. It's not so much for...
No, exactly.
For variable
so employees. As long as they are asking and it suits our business needs to let them go earlier, as long as we've just got a little something in writing, we're all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Tony. Oh. Sorry, Mario, I'll get to you next. Tony.
Yeah, we've just taken on a new employee. She's been with us for about 3 weeks now on 0-hour contract. At the time, at the induction meeting and sort of the interview meeting, she didn't mention she was pregnant. She's now disclosed that she's pregnant, and she's missed her last 2 shifts due to sickness. Any advice really going forward? I mean, she's only done 3 shifts with us.
Yeah. You're stuck with it. That's my advice.
Yeah.
They don't have to disclose that they're pregnant. As a matter of fact, it's probably better for you that they didn't. Because if they did, and then for some reason you chose not to employ her, even if the reason was something completely different, then she would have you for discrimination. So it's really better for you that employees don't tell you these things at candidate stage. But yes, the best thing you can do with her now is just treat her like you would any other employee who's been with you 6 years and they are now pregnant. you need to do the risk assessment. You need to have a chat about what they need. If she's really struggling with sickness at this point, hopefully that won't last the entire pregnancy. But you just kind of got to talk to her maybe about ensuring that she follows the correct absence reporting procedure, those kind of things. But you're not going to treat this employee any different than you would someone who's been with you 5 years and they're now pregnant.
Okay. So
you don't have options out of this.
So even though she hasn't shown up for 2 shifts on a 0-hour contract, there's nothing we can do?
No, because that's no different than someone who's worked with you for 5 years who didn't come in for 2 shifts because they're sick due to pregnancy-related illnesses. It's just, if anything you do now, it's going to be a
bad mark. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing all maternity entitlements, everything will all stand now.
Well, she probably won't be entitled to statutory maternity pay. I can calculate that for you, or you could do it on the .gov calculator. But there's usually a period that they need to be employed before they actually qualify for it. But she will still qualify for statutory maternity leave. Just won't get that pay. She'll get the other pay, which is kind of like less.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Murray.
Hi. Yeah, I have a cleaner on my staff. She's on 0 hours. She started in August, but as of mid-September, 23rd, actually, she ended up taking the position of a permanent cleaner who basically left the position. So she's been working every day. They're all part-time. They come in the evenings, 3 hours each. She's been working every day since the 23rd of September, 5 days a week. And last week, she unfortunately fractured her arm. Unrelated to my work, luckily.
Oh, thank goodness.
But the doctor has signed her off for 6 weeks. So she can't come to work for 6 weeks. We've got cover. Now our question is, she wants to know, she does qualify for SSP based on her rate, but she's on 0 hours, so I don't know if that qualifies her. Also she wants to know if she can take a combination of SSP and leave for these 6 weeks, because she'll get more for leave pay than SSP.
Okay, so I'll start with your first question, which is, I suppose it is, how much do I have to pay her? Because she's on a 0-hour contract, but she's been working full-time hours. You have to pay her weekly SSP in line with the average hours that she's worked over the last few months. So she's only been with you a few months, so I would take what you've got there. So realistically, if she's been working the full-time hours, your full-time hours, which is, what's that, 15 hours a week, roughly?
Yes.
If she's been working 15 hours a week, you should be paying her SSP for 15 hours a week. And you really should get her contract updated. Although, I don't know, might still work as a 0-hour contract for a while. As you guys might know, some rulings came out about 0-hour contracts 2 days ago, which I will dissect and come back to you on. So that you won't probably be able to do that for very much longer. But yes, at this point, you should pay her for the 15 hours a week in terms of SSP. Now, the second question, it is not the correct use for holiday to substitute sick pay with holiday pay. That is the by the book answer. However, it is perfectly acceptable, as she has requested it, to say, this is not normally the correct use for holiday, but on this one occasion, I would be happy to do this for you because you have this much holiday. And then allow her to take a day or two of holiday a week while she's off sick if she wants to, because it will help her financially. It also helps you burn through holiday while she's off sick anyway. So that works for you. The only thing I would say is don't do this as a rule for people. Make sure she understands this is a one-off. And also, don't allow her to use more holiday than she's accrued, because if she then doesn't want to come back at the end, you've got a mess.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay. And should I be starting with SSP or starting with holiday, or is there?
She'll probably want a mix. So ask her what she wants to do with it. Say you have this many days holiday that I can allow you to use during this period. How would you like to do it? And if she says, oh, just give me all the holiday at the first bit and then give me the sick pay, then that's fine. Or whatever she wants. It doesn't really matter to you, does it? At the end of the day, she might say, actually, pay me 2 days a week holiday.
So when does her 3 days non-paid sick leave start? Because there's 3 days non-paid, then only on day 4
that's at the start. So that she should be in that right now.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So that's right at the start. There's no, and she can cover that with holiday if she wants.
Sure. Okay.
If she has it available. But again, make sure she understands this is a one-off, because you don't want her every time she's sick in the future to be like, oh, can you make the waiting days holiday? You know, so yeah, be careful you don't fall into that trap.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Who's next for a question? Mal, you always have a question. No? I think Mal's frozen. No one else for any questions?
I do. Does that mean I'm allowed to ask it, or do you want me to wait?
No, Mal, go ahead. Ask your question.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, I can hear you.
Right. I'm going to take my video off in case it's bandwidth.
Okay.
So you probably know, which you do know, that I had somebody that was doing all sorts of weird cheating and lying and what have you, and we were going to let them go and all this sort of stuff. Turns out they've handed in their notice. Yay. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But
always a but. Carry on. Oh, have we lost her? Mal, I think we've lost you. All right, Dawn, if you have another question.
Yeah, I'll do a quick one when Mel comes back on. So yeah, just a quick one. I saw something that's come out recently, you know, about the holiday roll up, about the 12.7% paying for casuals. But the information that I got was it was just holiday calendars that were January, February or March. I mean, ours start April. So I don't know why that is.
Okay, I know what you mean. That was confusing.
Yes.
So it doesn't affect you. Let me put it this way. It doesn't affect any of you. What it was is the legislation changed, I want to say, at the end of 2023, potentially, about actually it changed in January. From the 1st of January 2024, the legislation changed back to what it used to be, to say that you can now use 12.07% again. You'll remember the few years before that, it was all that shenanigans about the amount of hours they worked in the 52 weeks and all of that, right? So, and then from the 1st of January 2024, the legislation changed back to 12.07. But you could only implement that change from the 1st of April 2024 if your holiday year started in April. If your holiday year started in January 2024, you had to wait until now before you could do it. And that's what that confusing bit of information is about. So you have no problem, Dawn, because you probably have already been doing it for all of 2024. If your holiday year starts in April. If you haven't, then you can go ahead and do it now.
Yeah. I mean, our casuals are, the managers are still managing the holiday and paying them to be off. What we want to do is just pay them off per month. I want our payroll to just pay them off per month.
Yeah.
So they haven't been doing that because I just perhaps haven't got the functionality to do it yet. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear with questioning, what's going on there.
Yeah, you can do that. So yeah, that I know what you mean. When it came out, it was very confusing to a number of our clients because they were like, does that mean we can or does it mean we can't? And, and all it really says is if you couldn't before, you can now. That's basically all it was saying.
All right, perfect.
Dawn, if you do want to change how you do this, you're going to need to inform your staff that you're doing that. It is a consultation to change.
Okay. Is there any specific, have you got anything sort of text?
I can have a look. I can check if we still have something. We probably will. It might be a year old now.
Okay. How much notice would I need to give them to let them know?
30 days.
Just 30 days. Okay.
Yeah. So it's perfect actually to say from the end of April, you will be paid monthly at 12.07% for any holiday accrued in that.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah. If you've got anything in text, that would be great. Thanks, Nadia.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Mel's not come back.
Oh.
It's all right. Anyone else with another question? No?
Maybe I will try. Hello. Albert.
Hello?
My name is Albert. Sorry. I don't know how I, appear on this place, but I've got the request, the email sent. And excuse me for my language, I'm Polish, originally. But I have a question.
We understand you.
Yeah, okay, great. So I have a question, and probably this will be also good for you guys, because I am assuming that all of you is working as a HR, professionals. So probably this will be good. But I've been like in this very shortly situation, and the question will be short about verbal warning.
Mm-hmm.
And the verbal warning, it's, I know that it sounds that this is verbal warning, but is the employer should keep any kind of information, like a follow-up, email or something like that after issuing verbal warning, or line manager? Is anything like that? Why I'm asking about this? Because this verbal warning, let's say, been issued on 2021, yes, and then the disciplinary, a procedure towards this employee was triggered in, let's say, in the middle of 2022. So I'm asking because, firstly, about the timeframes, yes, because if I understand, the verbal warning also should have some kind of timeframes, and also, if this verbal warning, if this was, let's say, issued on the beginning of 2021, could be used, for future disciplinary warning, especially that the time frame, I think, So sorry, if you need some more clarification, more than welcome, especially that the employee wasn't really, how to say, he really not acknowledged that this is actually verbal warning. He chose this as a informal conversation, when manager and they just clarified the situation and just start, of course, with this clarification. There wasn't something like saying verbal warning. Sorry.
Okay. So, Albert, first of all, this doesn't apply to this specific situation because this has now already been done. But for future, verbal warnings don't really exist anymore. And that is because if a verbal warning is followed up in writing, then it's no longer verbal. So it doesn't really make sense in terms of what it's called. If it's called a verbal warning, but then you follow it up in writing to confirm it, then it doesn't really make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what you would usually get is something like an advisory note to say, we discussed this, this, and this. This is not a formal warning, but it is an advisory note to say we discussed this, and if we have to talk about this again in the future, then disciplinary action will probably be taken. Something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
That is actually a magical tool for HR people, because that stays on file forever. It doesn't have a run-out date.
Okay.
So if you have something like that on file for an employee, some people call it a consultation note, some people call it a job chat, all sorts of names, right? If you've got something like that on file for an employee, it never runs out. It is a record of a conversation to say, we talked about something that was a problem, okay? And that means if 2-3 years later, something similar occurs, you can pull that out and say, we talked about this before, haven't we? So those things can stay on file forever, but they don't have a lot of power in terms of the disciplinary process, like a warning would, for example. Now, the other thing to understand about a verbal warning is, if you now already in a situation where you have this verbal warning situation, is that if it was really verbal in terms of a verbal warning, you need to distinguish whether that warning was given as part of a formal process. Was there investigation and then this warning was given? Or was it just a chat just a random chat to say, look, mate, you're doing this, this, and this. It's not right. You shouldn't be doing this, because then it really is, it falls into that kind of like job chat or advisory note level. Again, this is the awkwardness of verbal warnings, that they just don't really work anymore in the way that we run processes for disciplinaries. So if they weren't given as part of a proper process, they're not really that valid either. However, it doesn't mean that you can't say, we spoke to you about this before on this date, and this is what we discussed. Why are we here talking about this again? You can still do that, I think, in the situation that you're in. I just don't think you're going to have a lot of firepower with that warning, that verbal warning, as you would have had with a proper warning, a proper written warning.
Yes, and this is
that helpful?
Yes, very, very, because especially that this was this was sent then to this is small organization, and this was then sent to the let's say leadership team members with very small amount of information, with quite a big allegation. This was about the timekeeping, timesheets, so, and this is quite on the edge. Possibly for you will be quite good for experience, because this was like kind of accusation, and then after that the manager, it seems like he justified his investigations against this person, like and again the investigation which been triggered, like I said, was in 2022. So but it's almost like based like with the, how to say in English, like an implication, that because there was a verbal warning, the people which been carry on, like a disciplinary. This wasn't HR. This was like a inside of the company, to people designated, and based on that, this was some kind of how to say, like bias, because this was done. Okay. This was done only. By very, very, very close related people. So this wasn't like something what was fair and just. So that's why I'm asking about this power of this verbal warning, and thank you for your answer, because it's just showing, me and telling a bit more. And sorry that I'm not showing my face, because my internet connection is very, is very weak. So
that's all right. I would say, Albert, that if this verbal warning was referred to in an investigation, along with other evidence of then future lateness, for example, incidents of future lateness. So to say we spoke to him about it in 2022, here's a note that says we spoke to him about it. then he's now been late again, 7 or 8 times in the last 6 months. And it forms together evidence like that, then that is acceptable, but it's not going to be acceptable for a dismissal. It's probably only going to be acceptable for, an investigation, potentially moving to a disciplinary, potentially a warning, a first warning.
Okay.
It's not really going to be powerful enough to base a dismissal on, if that makes sense.
Okay, so just the last question. So that means that, let's say, very important. Do the employer should keep the evidence in the employee, file after, any kind of disciplinary procedures, including, let's say, like you very, very well explained about this verbal warning, when he was mentioning that the verbal warning was issued because he checked CCTV recordings or something like that. And then another, so do the employer should keep, for the future reference, this kind of evidence? Because the situation of this situation, they don't have any kind of evidence.
Yeah, no, so we sometimes see that. So you sometimes see poor
management or whatever
by employers.
Yeah.
So the first answer, the correct by the book answer is yes, they should be keeping all of this. The realistic answer is they often don't, and you just have patchy stuff. But if they're going to invite him to a disciplinary meeting, for example, they will need to share the evidence that they are basing their meeting on with the person before the meeting. So they'll need to find that evidence if they haven't stored and recorded it correctly.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And by find, I don't mean create. By find, I mean they'll need to go and look where it is.
Yeah, exactly. And this was exactly, that's a good point. Not create this document, in the, like from the past. And this is actually very, very good for you guys to advise the clients, that really, really is important, because in this situation, this is exposing the employer, very, very, very much so, because I could see that this is not giving the, how to say, especially that the disciplinary process was not involving any, like you specialists, like HR, specialists, which they could, really, either to put some kind of, accent or warning that this and this should be, more precise or like, But anyway, thank you so much, because this was
no problem.
In my situation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys, I will. Oh, you got another question, Murray. Go for it.
Hi. Yes, thanks. I have two. First was just clarify on the 12.07% holiday of what actually changed. And the reason I asked that question is before this so-called change, our contract said, written by you, our 0-hour ones, that leave is based on pro rata actual hours worked. And when we did the pro rata, we used the 12.07%. So what actually changed?
Murray, I feel like we did your contracts around the time of the change, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
We may have, I feel like it was around that time. So I'm not sure if we created them for the old or for the new. Basically, previously, before the start of 2024, for a couple of years, there was this horrible period for all of you guys where you had to pay your 0-hour staff 28 days holiday, no matter how many days they worked or how many hours they worked, right? So sometimes they'd be working 5 hours a month. You still had to pay them 28 days holiday, all right? It didn't matter how many hours they worked. And then you calculated, and I don't want, please don't get scared about this because this is over. It's a trauma, but it's over, okay? You then had to calculate how much you paid them for those 28 days holiday based on the amount of hours they'd worked over a 52-week period. So they might have had 28 days of paid holiday, but they might have got like £8.50 a day kind of thing, because if they work very little amount of hours. Before this change was in place, you could pay your staff 12.07% for 0-hour staff at the end of the month, and you're paying them out every month for the hours, holiday hours that they accrued. So 12.07% on top of the hours that they've worked, based on the number of hours they've worked. Then came this ridiculous change for a couple of years, and then someone saw the light and they decided to change it back. So now, again, you are able to pay staff 12.07% based on the hours worked, and you pay that. You can pay that monthly. You should pay that monthly, by the way. Don't let it add up, because one of the problems, one of the reasons it changed in the first place was because employers would let that add up for an entire year before they paid it out and things like that. It should be paid out monthly, to keep it clean.
Thank
Does
you.
that happen? I'm sorry. I hope it does.
Second question is, are there different rules for people employed as a private school teacher? Because, for example, if the contract says 7 hours a day as teaching, but then the school adds on to them weekend work, they do overtime marking, they're expected to do lesson preparations, extramural activities, overtime training, all the rest of it, and get no extra pay.
And then they have these big blocks of holiday that they don't work at all, right?
Okay.
So without laying blame to anyone, they were called part-year workers, basically. And teachers were very prominent. They weren't the only people in this group, but they were very prominent in this group for all of those things you've just asked me about, right? Okay. And that was, in the first place, the reason for the tribunal court ruling that then led to this weird change we had for a couple of years. It was to ensure that people who were part-year workers, like teachers, ended or cleaning staff in schools, for example, was one of the other situations, that they then ended up still getting the fair amount of holiday, because they had these big periods of not working, but then when they were working, there were extra things on top. So that's why now there is still part worker holiday legislation, but it no longer includes 0-hour people. So in short, the answer is yes, Murray, there are different ways to do 0-hour than there are for teachers.
So because of their long holidays, the school doesn't have to pay them overtime hours for all the other stuff they do. They can stick to the 7 hours a day salary.
I would need to look into it to be able to tell you exactly what the situation is. It will depend a little bit on what their contract says, and I'd have to compare that with what the law says about paying them.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, this was lovely. And next week, Carolyne will be back from holiday, so I'm sure she'll be entertaining us with stories of her holiday. Have a lovely weekend, all, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want a free tribunal audit of your employment contract and handbook, click the link in the description below.